All right, Cesspool 153, Foss, Tejon. We're going to talk about something near and dear to your heart. I think I got the perfect guy on for this, is Bud Light. I thought this story would go away kind of quick, and it really hasn't. But you've probably consumed more Bud Light than any other fluid, right? And more than Mountain Dew, cum, water, all that combined.
I would have to agree, except for cum.
No, is that so? What beats out? Is that Bud Light or semen?
Oh, mango.
Yeah,
easily.
Bud Light, they did a campaign with a transgender influencer, and I want to say personally, I think both sides of the coin acted stupid. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, and here's what I mean by that is anyone that's and as a consumer, hey, you can stop drinking it. I mean, that's your choice. But what I mean by that is anyone that just overreacts in one way or another. Like if you're for transgenders being on Bud Light cans, it's very weird for you to constantly post how you're drinking the tears of right-wingers and just acting like a complete dipshit. And then, the whole other side, if you're, taking your AR out and shooting up your case of Bud Light, I think those are both equally stupid reaction.
Yes. I actually saw a video, I believe it was today, of someone who took, it was over like 1,000 cans. I don't know how many cases they had, but they took one of those rollers. You know how they roll out asphalt? They took a roller and ran over 1,000 cans of Bud Light. And I was like, how much money did you waste just making this 20-second video?
Yeah.
This is dumb.
Has this affected your drinking habits at all?
Actually, no, because I quit drinking Bud Light probably a month before this whole Dylan Mulvaney sponsorship come out. I've stopped drinking beer. I don't know. It's just, it seems like I know what Kid Rock is doing. Once again, he's trying to stay relevant, trying to stay in the news.
And pandering and pandering well, though.
Yes, he's pandering well. Obviously, Bud Light stock has dropped as of Monday. It took a very sharp decline by like 2%. There are certain distributors that are panicking at this point because they're like, hey, this shit is not selling now because you guys made this decision. Obviously, the gal that took over as the head of marketing for Bud Light, she was saying, oh, this brand has been in decline for years and we're just trying to beef it back up. And then all of a sudden she starts throwing in all the buzzwords that us conservatives, they perk our ears whenever we hear them. Whenever you say things like diversity and inclusion, we hear those words and we're like, okay, this is a gal that obviously went to like Harvard, Wartburg, and sure as shit she did. Bud Light is a poor man's beer. There's a lot of poor and middle class that drink it, right? I don't know too many rich people that drink a fuck ton of Bud Light like poor people do.
Well, I wouldn't know if it was poor people because I mean there is Schlitz and Mickey's and there's beers way cheaper. I would say lower middle class for sure to middle class.
But whenever you look at who drinks Bud Light, it is not people that are woke or typically buying into a certain agenda.
No, it's an everyday person.
Which is where this gal was going with the marketing strategy. But it obviously kind of backfired and alienated a bunch of people whenever you have someone like Kid Rock, as cringe as he is at 50 years old, that's pulling the stunts he's pulling. It's going to influence a lot of people, and now you have country stars that are pulling out of it. You have just a ton of very influential people that are pulling back from Bud Light because they see that it's toxic now. People don't want to be associated with Dylan Mulvaney. He is a strange individual. He's a man parading around saying he's a woman. He makes all these weird TikTok videos talking about, oh, it's day 365 of being a woman, and talking about how great it is to be a woman. And it's, if you talk to real women that aren't weird, they're going to tell you it's highly offensive what this guy's doing.
Yeah, I mean, when it first came out, I was, my thought process was, Anheuser-Busch, they really don't give a damn if you're white, transvestite, African American, because they just want your dollar. And I think maybe they overthought this, maybe get out in front, because that's all this was a business decision, a ploy to get dollars. Because, that's what businesses do. Now, there's a lot of areas in the United States where they said over just the first weekend of this happening that they can't even recover. Like, they will not make their yearlies. Like, the numbers are crazy. If you can find some articles on, just certain areas, and obviously, Texas being one of them. But you can probably guess, some of the areas. But they said, 80% of some places, 80% of the Bud Light drinkers have stopped. And, people that weren't privy to this news, once they got told, they stopped too. So I guess it really did kind of backfire. And honestly, I just didn't expect it to.
Well, it's largely Midwestern states, right? And that's not where the population is at, but that's where probably the majority of Bud Light gets drank is Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota. This area in the middle of the country is who you should be catering to.
I've always been a Miller Lite guy, but that's just because of headaches.
Yes. No, I completely understand your complaint against Bud Light. It's just not your beer.
Well, that being said, like you, there's very few far between here because we're in the Midwest. Bud Light is the main thing everywhere. And you go to someone's house or, a party, tailgate or anything, it's more than likely going to be Bud Light by a staggering number.
Very true.
Or it used to be. I don't know.
Anywhere you go, if you go over to a friend's house, more than likely they'll have Bud Light in the fridge if they're a drinker. Sales have just dropped off a cliff around here. What's strange is the bulk of the population of the United States lives in coastal areas. I don't know how much of that population drinks Bud Light. I would think it's probably a considerable amount. I would be very, very curious to see how the sales have dropped off in coastal areas. I don't know how likely it is. They tend to be a little more Democrat, a little more woke, buy into some of the ideas of diversity and inclusion. I definitely agree with your statement earlier that I think all parties have overreacted. Bud Light overreacted. The Kid Rock fan base overreacted. The left has overreacted.
Yeah, the transgenders thinking this is some kind of a win.
Right. When what you're gonna see is Bud Light, they're gonna eventually fire this gal. I would say within 6 months to a year, this gal's gonna be gone.
Yeah, they'll let it die down. They can't do it now because that wouldn't look great.
They want to get out of the news cycle. They want to give it a few weeks, and then she's going to be looking for a new job. And then all of a sudden, your win looks really fucking dumb because you just tanked the company.
Are we going to get back to Real Men of Genius? Or was that Budweiser? Was that Bud Light? Those commercials? It's going to get all manly again?
I think so. But you can go back in history and they have all kinds of moments where they somewhat catered to the gay community, the trans community. You remember like the 4 dudes that used to dress up in dresses for Bud Light?
Yeah. They had mustaches. Well, some of them did.
Yeah. They were wearing wigs, but they were all obviously men. Like they didn't shave.
It looked like Don Fry in a wig or whatever. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. But if you think back to those commercials weren't about transgender men. Those were guys dressing up as girls in order to have easy access to Bud Light, and I think for free. Like as long as they were women, people were giving them Bud Light, and that's why they were doing it. So it's funny. I've seen that there are certain sites on Facebook that I follow that are very, very leftist that are posting all these pictures and saying, "Oh, look at all these instances where Bud Light was actually catering to the community," and it's like, well, they weren't necessarily catering. There's more context to it.
So, what are your thoughts on the Trump thing? Do you think he is now what people say infamous? Do you have a shirt with his mugshot on it? Because those were already like pre-made and came out the second he took that trip.
Right, but they never arrested him. They never put cuffs on him.
No, but
they never booked him.
They totally used it as, a lot of people are like, oh, this is going to, be like when Tupac and Biggie had their mugshot, all these, because, mugshots are famous for whatever reason. So he, his PR team, spun it smartly, and, he's damn good at pandering to his fans too.
He welcomed it because he wanted the photo ops. Trump is in the position where now it's just a circus around the man. Now that he's not actually the CEO of the United States, chief executive, now everything is just crazy around the man because he's been targeted since 2015 or 2016, whenever he announced that he was running.
Endlessly.
He's in the news every single day. I'm actually on a website right now. One of my favorite news websites. There's an article.
Brazzers.
What's her name? Stormy Daniels.
So did you think this helps or hurts?
Both. Obviously, Donald Trump got a huge bump in political donations within the 48 hours of the announcement of the indictment. I think he got like $12 million, which is huge. He's obviously endlessly in the news cycle, which is free PR for the man. The case against him is super flimsy. I don't quite know if it's going to be thrown out, but I've heard from several lawyers in various articles. I don't personally know several lawyers, but from various articles, there's a lot of people that are legal scholars that are saying this case should have never been brought to court. This is a completely ridiculous case. They're relying on a theory that has never been utilized before. It's a bullshit case. I don't know if he can get convicted on it, but it's 2023, and it's a jury in Manhattan. I don't think it's out of the realm that he actually gets convicted, but this case never should have been brought to court. But also, you got to keep in mind, there's like 4 or 5 other court cases that are pending against Trump. You have a special prosecutor that was appointed by the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney General, that is desperately seeking an indictment in Georgia for seeking to overturn the election. I don't know how that's a crime. There's a lot of ways that you can spin that. Yeah, it's definitely strange, but I think some of it's just based off phone calls that he had with like Brad Raffensperger, which was the Secretary of State in Georgia. Obviously, I don't keep up with it anymore. It gets nauseating at a certain point. But there's a lot of stuff that's going on with Trump, and it's I don't know if he's necessarily toxic. This is just the way that Democrats do things. Is they go after whoever is their biggest enemy. Obviously, Ron DeSantis, he's traveling around to various states. There's a pretty good potential he may announce for 2024. But that you see like the Miami Herald, the Washington Post, New York Times, they all put out hit pieces on Ron DeSantis day in, day out. There's always a new one all the time. There's a new conspiracy against him, but it's just trash. All it is trash. These are very, very leftist writers that are producing these stories with a very biased slant. And typically conservatives, we're kind of at the point now we've been inundated with fake news, to use the term that Trump coined. We've been inundated so much with fake news that a lot of us are just kind of, we read the articles and we see the bias right away. It reflects very, very badly on these journalists. Instead of just reporting the news, just report the fucking news. You have to give your opinion, and you have to try to make every conservative look bad, while people like Biden, who there is huge indicators that this guy's been corrupted by China and he's doing China's bidding. There's huge corruption within his family. Just look at his son. His son has been in so much trouble here lately. Nobody ever drops the hammer on them. I mean, if a conservative writes an article about Hunter Biden, you have all these people that come out on Twitter and defend the kid. Well, I guess not kid. I mean, he is, 47 or 50 years old now?
All I know is if Trump came out after a school shooting and talked about ice cream for the first few minutes, holy shit. You wouldn't hear the end of that.
Exhilarated. Right. So there's obviously a double standard within the media today. And it's very clear. You know, no president that's good at his job comes out and does that. Oh, I came down here because I heard there was ice cream. What's wrong with you? Like, there was just 3 kids and 3 adults shot at a Christian school from a whacked out transgender individual.
And you think coming they drank Bud Light? I heard like the hallways were just littered with Bud Light cans.
You would have to in order to do something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, I would say it was a very eventful couple of weeks for Trump. He was cage side at the Miami UFC with Dana White, Kid Rock, and Mike Tyson. And I mean, he was cage side. You saw him the whole time.
Right.
During
I did see that.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Not to be like a huge, Trump fan or anything, but that was kind of neat to see him come out with Kid Rock and Mike Tyson. That would be a trip, man.
Oh, that's got to be the Mount Rushmore of what the fuck. I mean, those 4. I mean, that's an eclectic group of. It's hard. I don't know what adjective to use for it. I mean, you know what I mean. Those are 4 unique individuals. I'm not sure I want a night out with that either.
Well, I always hearken back to what Joe Rogan said about Mike Tyson. He said he was the scariest individual to interview because he was so crazy for so many years, and so you never know what you're going to get in an interview. I mean,
well, he had his own podcast there for a while, and that he's not exactly eloquent or anything like that. So he basically, it was like he had a host. So he was pretty much like a co-host that like occasionally chimed in while the other guy did like the interviews, and it was bizarre, but it's his name all over it and stuff. But yeah, I mean, you can tell like maybe he could just become unhinged pretty quick,
Well, he did in several interviews whenever he was young. Whenever he was champ of the world, there were several times where sports writers would ask him tough questions, and he would just go into crazy attack mode.
Tyson's still that one guy that I don't know. Even when he gets older, you're still weary for some reason.
Well, he just did the fight against what's his name? What was that? Last year or 2 years ago?
Oh, Roy Jones.
Roy Jones. Yeah. Well, I know it was an exhibition fight, but Tyson. They said Tyson looked fucking phenomenal.
The funny story behind that is, I guess supposedly, and who really knows, but I guess he kind of needed some money. That's why he was going to come back, and he had all these exhibition fights lined up, and he was going to do like a number of them. Like the Roy Jones thing was supposed to be the start, but he came out with, the edibles, the edible ears. You remember, the
right,
yeah, and he made like $20 million off the edibles, and then went. Screw the pugilism. I'm not boxing anymore. I just made, 20 mil off these edible ears. So that's
okay.
Yeah. But he was supposed to, do a whole circuit, but
I honestly, I wouldn't have minded that. I thoroughly enjoy Mike Tyson's boxing matches.
Yeah.
And he's still fit. He's still, it's a little bit circus just because of the age. I mean, how old is Tyson now?
Nah, he's got to be early 50s,
52?
Right? I would say something like that without looking.
Yeah, I mean, he's slightly older. Well, no, maybe he's not older than me.
No, he'd have to be. I mean, his heyday was like, 89, but he was young. So, I mean, he's got to at least, I'd say 52, 53. So.
That's right. He is in his 50s. But I've seen these videos that he puts out of him, like, doing his training on the beach and
drinking Bud Light.
Drinking a fuck ton of Bud Light. Dylan Mulvaney holding the heavy bag for him.
Yeah, that kid's shoulders would be torn out of his body.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I want to see Dylan Mulvaney in UFC.
Well, speaking of that, the company that owns UFC has merged with WWE. What a what a weird deal this is. And another thing is, Vince McMahon, he had to go away for a while because of the he had to pay off a bunch of women, for the sexual exploits, the accusations of
right,
forced oral and whatever else he was doing. But he's back, and he's got like a real thin pencil mustache. People say he looks like a Bond villain now, and he's not gray anymore. He has somehow reversed aging, and this man is dark brown hair, dark brown, pencil thin mustache. Better than ever. But he's gonna own. I think he owns like 18% of Endeavor now. So he got kind of a crazy. He's gonna be richer than ever.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a decent payday.
He's ahead of Dana White in that company. Very odd.
UFC?
No, in Endeavor.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They're both under the Endeavor umbrella.
Okay, but that's right.
McMahon is ahead of Dana White all of a sudden. So.
Well, and obviously we talked about this a little bit outside of the stream here last week. I kind of like this because we have constantly talked about what it would be like to see a little more animation from UFC. And obviously late 90s, early 2000s, you had a huge influx of awesome talent to come into WWE with The Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H. Some of those guys have been around for a long time, but it seemed like around the year 2000 was whenever WWE just had crazy shows every night. They did very, very well. And we had talked about bringing some of the character development and the storylines to UFC. How interesting it would be if you could create some kind of fake conflict between fighters, because obviously whenever you go to the media days with all the fighters and you have all these guys sitting around, Tito Ortiz trying to shit talk Chael Sonnen, who is obviously the master of shit talk, it just didn't go well. It was super terrible. But how hype would the fight be if you actually had these guys that were good at going in front of the media and hyping a fight? UFC would have made
there's a small percentage that are just naturally good at it, obviously. But what you're getting at is, maybe if Tito had some lines or, was more up to speed on, promos and stuff like that, how much better.
Right.
Sell rate.
But also the blending of the companies, because we know that there's WWE fighters that have wanted to transition into UFC fighting. And it would honestly be really, really fun to see some of the UFC fighters who are obviously badass athletes that could transition into WWE every once in a while.
Yeah,
I think it's a great fit. I think it's a great fit.
I mean, when they asked Dana White about it, he said they'll cross promote about as much as they do now. So that's nothing. That's not a lot.
Like zero.
Yeah. So
that sounds just as all business since then.
Yeah, but it could just be him saying that too.
Well, so here's what they should do. So whenever this gal gets fired from Bud Light, the marketing president, she should move into to Endeavor and do their marketing. And maybe you're going to see a huge bump in the promotion between the two entities.
I don't see that happening.
Yeah, you're right. Me neither. Fuck her.